As a therapist, one of the most common types of anxiety that comes up with the people that I work with is financial anxiety. And this lines up with the stats. Money is the number one source of stress for Canadians, and almost half of Canadians say that they lose sleep over financial worries. And if that wasn't bad enough, the numbers are even worse in the States. When it comes to managing financial anxiety, this is where I think the traditional therapy tools we have often fall short. CBT isn't going to convince you that your anxieties about the T word are actually irrational. And attachment theory might help to explain why you're scared to open up in relationships, but it doesn't explain why you're too scared to open up your banking app. In this economy, we need more practical tools that are actually going to help us stop constantly worrying about money and get some sleep at night. And this isn't just something that's been on my mind as a therapist. It's also been something that I've been thinking about just personally as someone who also falls into these stats. Since going all in on working for myself about 2 years ago now and giving up the comfort of a bi-weekly paycheck in a post-pandemic world, I've been on quite the journey of trying to figure out how to manage my own financial anxiety. I've read books, taken courses, listened to hundreds of podcasts and videos by the experts, and along the way, I started to combine the most helpful things I was learning from the finance world with my therapy tools to come up with a set of strategies that really work for me to help me to feel less stressed and more in control when it comes to money. And today I want to share them with you in this video in the hopes that they help you too. If you're new to this channel, hi, I'm Audrey. I'm a therapist, and on this channel we talk about tools for strengthening our relationships with others and with ourselves. And this video is actually part 2 in our 2-part series on how to build a healthier relationship with money, which is such an important but such an under-discussed part of our relationship with ourselves. So if this is a topic that interests you and you missed part 1, then I will leave that linked in the description for you to check out if you'd like. Also, whenever the topic of money comes up, I feel like there needs to be a disclaimer of I'm not a financial expert. I am a therapist, but I'm not your personal therapist. So this isn't meant to be advice or speak to your specific situation. I'm simply sharing my experience with what's helped me, and hopefully something here helps you too. If you're looking for personalized advice for your own individual situation, then please seek out one-on-one support from the appropriate professionals. With that said, let's get into the first strategy. I put this one first on purpose because the rest of the strategies aren't really going to do much for us unless we start here, and you'll see why. Have you ever wondered why you're constantly worrying that you're not going to make it, even though technically on paper your bank account says that you're doing okay? Or why you get a wave of guilt every time you spend money on anything that isn't strictly necessary? Or why you tend to be judgmental of rich people and you've wondered where this reaction even comes from? Well, we're going to find our answers to all of these questions in our first strategy, which is to unpack your money baggage. Like many of our deep-seated emotional patterns, our money baggage often also traces back to our upbringing. According to this PBS report, by the time we are 3 years old, we can already understand basic concepts about money. And by the time we're 7, our values around money are set, which means that if we look back at what was going on in our family around money at that time, what was said about it, how it was handled, and how it felt to us, that's going to tell us a lot about any money baggage we might carry today. And in many cases, we're going to find that any negative attitudes or unhelpful habits we have around money today mirror what we observed from our parents growing up. Now, none of this is to say that our parents are to blame for all of our issues. That's not the point of me sharing this information, especially if money was actually scarce and living in this fear and scarcity mindset was just necessary for survival. I share this because if we're serious about building a healthier relationship with money, we need to understand how our money beliefs even formed in the first place. And once we realize that many of our beliefs around money are inherited, we can be like, oh, that's why I think or act this way with money. It's because this is what I saw in my family growing up. And having this awareness is the first step to unlearning any old hand-me-down beliefs that aren't helping us and rebuilding a healthier mindset around money. So with that in mind, I invite you to reflect on these 2 questions. Number 1, what did I learn about money in my family growing up? This could be explicit lessons about money that your parents lectured you about, Or it could be implicit lessons that were modeled through their behavior with money. And number two, how do these lessons show up in my feelings and behavior around money today? Maybe you notice you have a belief that money is really hard to earn, and that leads to you feeling discouraged and having thoughts like, what's even the point of trying? Or maybe deep down you believe that making money makes you greedy and selfish, and that makes you feel even ashamed for caring about money at all. Or if you're like me, you might have also realized that a lot of your money baggage comes from growing up with a scarcity mindset. And we touched on this briefly in part one, but I think this is a very common experience for children of immigrants. And if you have immigrant parents too, then maybe the story I'm about to share will sound familiar to you. For me, the main message that I got around money growing up was that spending any amount of money at all was like a sin. It was like the worst possible thing you could do, and it should just be avoided at all costs. Here are some examples of what that looked like for me growing up. Growing up, my mom used to wash plastic wrap so that she didn't have to throw it out and she could reuse it. She would also travel to 3 different grocery stores every weekend to make sure that she could get the cheapest deals possible, even if it meant driving an extra 20 minutes to save 25 cents on yogurt. She would do anything to avoid spending any money. And even to this day, this still shows up in certain ways. My parents still barely turn the heat on in the winter. And last winter when I visited them, even though I was wearing my thickest sweater, which I packed on purpose knowing that their house is freezing, my lips still turned purple. I also remember one time when I was maybe 7 years old, I bought a Gatorade from a vending machine because my friend was also getting one at the time, and my mom blew up at me. She called me wasteful and she said that I didn't know the value of $1. You might hear this and wonder if I grew up in poverty, but I didn't. I grew up very middle class, and that is a very privileged position to be in. And now that I'm an adult with my, adult understanding of the world, I can look back on my mom's behavior and really understand it. I can see that she was still living as if she was a new immigrant, even though she had long established herself and had been earning a full-time income for over a decade. She was still living in survival mode long after that threat had passed, which is a very common experience for people who have experienced legitimate threats to their safety and survival. I can't blame my parents for the way they are. Immigrating to a new country is like one of the most stressful things that anyone can go through, so it's no wonder that a $2 Gatorade is a luxury that you just can't justify spending money on. The funny thing is though, even though I've made sense of this childhood experience and I've decided for myself with my, very privileged westernized worldview that I don't subscribe to this extreme frugality where you sacrifice your quality of life, I still see remnants of my parents' mentality around money in my own. And even though I'm an adult now with my own adult income, I still get this feeling like I'm doing something wrong when I spend money on anything that's unnecessary. So clothes, matcha lattes, the more expensive but better quality toilet paper. I'm still working on unlearning my shame around spending money, but I have come a very long way over the years thanks to one key thing I've done, and that brings us to strategy number 2. The good news is that even if your parents didn't model healthy mindsets and behaviors around money, you're not doomed to struggle forever. You can still relearn new, healthier, more balanced mindsets around money. For me, relearning my money beliefs has gone hand in hand with improving my financial literacy. But with one very important detail, I don't choose to just learn from anyone just because they have a best-selling book or a big following. I choose to learn from people whose message personally resonates with me. Some of these people have been Vivian Tu of Your Rich BFF, Simran Kaur of Girls That Invest, and Nisha and Vincent Chan here on YouTube. The reason I choose to learn from these creators is because I see myself in their story. They're all around my age and they're all people of color, and most of them are women of color. Vincent and Vivian have also talked about their experience of growing up in a Chinese household and thinking that scrimping and saving is the way to get rich, and then eventually finding out that that's not actually how it works. I'm also really inspired by all of their career paths. They all left well-paying, stable jobs to build something meaningful of their own. And that's the path that I'm trying to be on. So because they've been through it, I feel like they get it, and that makes me want to learn from them. And through learning from these creators, plus a handful of other books and articles that I found very eye-opening, I've really come to see that information truly is power. The more knowledge I gained, the more I could feel my old unhelpful beliefs about money slowly being replaced by new, healthier ones. And today, when I think about my finances, the resounding emotions I feel are empowered and in control. And me 5 years ago wouldn't have even been able to imagine that I'd be able to say this today. And the only reason I can say it is because I took the time to educate myself. So I really have to thank these creators who are from my generation, who are culturally diverse, and who chose an unconventional path for sharing their stories and their knowledge so openly. Because if the only option was to learn about finance from old white men, I would have lost interest long ago and my relationship with money would still be a mess. So I really encourage you to seek out information on your own terms as well and find creators in the finance space who speak to you. Because when you relate to someone's story and resonate with their values, you're gonna be way more likely to stay engaged and keep doing the work to rewrite those outdated money beliefs into ones that actually serve you. The rest of the strategies in this video are ones that I've picked up in my learning and I've kind of put my own spin on. So let's move on to the next one, which is to do a regular money check-in. I used to be terrified of looking at my bank account. I was like an ostrich when it came to my money. I would just stick my head in the sand because I didn't want to face whatever I might find if I opened my banking app. The only reason I started checking my accounts was because I had to when I started working for myself. But honestly, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And over time, this process that started as something scary and that I only did out of necessity turned into something that was actually really empowering and that actually helped me to lower my anxiety about my finances, which is the exact opposite of what I thought would happen if I looked at my accounts. So let me take you through what I do for my monthly money check-in. This is really just my way of saying monthly budgeting. I just have a really strong negative association with the word budget, and honestly, I'd probably avoid doing it at all if I called it that. So I call it a check-in, which I think sounds a lot more inviting. On the first of every month, I go through all of my credit card and bank statements and I plug in every transaction into my money tracker Google Sheet. I group all of my spending into categories and then I do the most important part. I review my spending and I just do a gut check of how do I feel about how I spent my money that month? Are there any categories that I look at and go, ugh, which is exactly how I reacted when I saw how much I spent on clothes last Black Friday. And this is really helpful for me to be aware of because now I can course correct so that my spending is more in line with what I actually value. So in this case, I just chose to put a pause on buying any more clothes for the next few months. And that was a decision that I felt good about. Next, I forecast my next month's income since I work for myself, so that amount varies from month to month. And then based on this estimate, I assign a ballpark amount to each of my spending categories. And I've been doing this for long enough now that I can just intuitively know how much to assign for each category. Now, I don't treat any of these amounts as rigid limits. Instead, I see them more like flexible guidelines. Another thing that I always do, and this is honestly the main thing that has helped me to overcome shame around spending, is I give myself an amount for what Vivian Tu calls non-negotiables in her book, Rich AF. Non-negotiables are the extra little treats or luxuries that Vivian says everyone needs to have at least one of in their life, no matter what. So for me right now, that would be Pilates classes, $35 to $45 a class. It's extortionate, but for me, it's worth it for the benefit that I get out of the class. I'm always in such a good mood for the rest of the day after I take the class, and in the weeks that I don't have a class, I feel like something's missing. I love this idea of having non-negotiables because it gives you permission to spend for enjoyment and not feel guilty or ashamed for it because you plan for it in advance. Doing this monthly money check-in has completely changed how I see budgeting. I used to think it was only there to make your life miserable and deprive you of everything you enjoy. But now I see it as an opportunity to take control, not just of your finances, but of your life. And it has become a non-negotiable for me to make sure that I have peace of mind, not just with my finances, but in general. I honestly can't and don't want to imagine what my life would look like if I didn't do my monthly money check-in. That would be like traveling without Google Maps, and just the thought of that gives me anxiety. Now, this is how I budget, but that doesn't mean that it's the right way or that it's going to be a good fit for you. So I'd highly recommend exploring different budgeting methods until you find one that fits your lifestyle. And Vivian does a great job at outlining a few different budgeting methods in her book Rich AF, so I think that'd be a really good place to start. There are 2 more steps that I do as part of my monthly money check-in, and these are the ones that give me the most peace of mind. And these are also going to be the next 2 strategies that we talk about. So let's dive into the first one now, which is to build your safety net. I used to see building a safety net as one of those boring, never-ending parts of being an adult. Kind of like doing the dishes. It's necessary, but no one actually wants to do it. However, I've had a few pivotal experiences over the past few years that have completely changed my perspective on this. All of them happened while I was working at the hospital. If I learned anything from my time there, it's that life will throw you unpleasant surprises. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And a lot of the time, these surprises are very costly. And if you don't have savings to deploy to deal with them when they happen, you're gonna be left scrambling, and you're gonna be forced to make really important decisions from a place of panic. And trust me, as someone who has seen this happen time and time again, you really don't want to be in that position. I know that neither I nor my loved ones are immune to those same kinds of financial emergencies. So when that time comes, I want to be ready so that I can make a decision from a place of security, not desperation. Another turning point for me was when I made my first big financial risk, which was dropping down from full-time to part-time at the hospital. I made this decision because I had a really bad case of burnout where I had to take a sick leave, and the only reason why I could afford to take that pay cut and prioritize my health at the time was because I had a financial cushion. Morgan Housel writes in his book, The Psychology of Money, every bit of savings is like taking a point in the future that would have been owned by someone else and giving it back to yourself. And instead of calling it an emergency fund, he calls it an independence fund. And that really resonated with me as someone who has experienced firsthand how having savings can buy you your freedom when you need it the most. That actually makes adding to this fund feel even more rewarding than buying something that would be nice to have, but I definitely don't need as much as I need freedom and options. Every time I make a contribution, I can feel my sense of security growing, and that's just a feeling I can't get from buying a new Lululemon matching set. So if you are also serious about protecting your peace, having an emergency fund or an independence fund is a non-negotiable. The second step in my monthly money check-in helps me to deal with one of the biggest existential anxieties that plagues my entire generation. Will I have enough money to retire? And that step is investing. If you've spent any time in the personal finance world, you've probably also heard people shouting from the rooftops, if you want to grow your wealth, you need to be consistently investing in
low-cost index funds.
You've probably seen charts like this and heard quotes like, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. The best time to start investing was yesterday. The next best time is today. That all sounds great in theory, but in practice, how are you supposed to keep consistently putting your money in the stock market when the news headlines look like this? Thankfully, Morgan Housel has answered that exact question for us in his book, The Psychology of Money. He says that anxiety, doubt, fear, and uncertainty are the price of admission to successful investing. If you want to experience the magic of compound interest, you don't get to just do that for free. You need to pay up, but not in money, in emotional discomfort, in seeing your entire portfolio in the red, and instead of panicking and pulling all your money out, you actually do the complete opposite and you put more money in. This feels completely counterintuitive, and emotionally it makes zero sense. But over time, as I've seen my portfolio actually grow despite the economy going through an entire pandemic and then now whatever this current mess is, I've actually gotten some very convincing evidence that this discomfort is a fee worth paying. Knowing this has given me the reassurance to keep investing month after month, even if the economy is a complete circus, because I trust that one day I will be rewarded for my patience. And when I'm 60, I'll be able to live my best retirement life, go to yoga every morning, get brunch with the girls every Sunday, and not really think about money much at all, because younger me already paid the price to be able to have that level of chill. As I'm editing, I'm realizing I should probably clarify that I'm not trying to day trade or pick individual stocks. I really have like my 4 go-to ETFs that I just keep investing in, and I just plan to hold them until I retire. So it's really as like boring and uninteresting as it gets over here. The next strategy is probably the easiest and least time-consuming strategy of all the ones we'll talk about today, and that is to automate your finances. We don't want to be wasting our precious mental energy worrying about having to remember when every single one of our monthly bills is due. So if there is an option to set up pre-authorized payment on any bill we might have, we're gonna sign up for that immediately. Another thing that's absolutely worth automating is your savings and investing. Most banks have the option to set up automatic transfers where every month a set amount that you decide on automatically goes into your savings and investing accounts. For me, having everything about my finances just running on autopilot while I live my life has given me peace of mind like nothing else. And I want you to also experience what it's like for everything to be going where it needs to go without you even needing to lift a finger. It is magical. So please take the few moments to set this up. Don't let it become one of those life admin tasks that just sits on your to-do list for months. It could take you all of 30 minutes and it's gonna pay you dividends in your long-term peace of mind. Now, all this talk about saving, investing, and automating your finances sounds great, but it's not really gonna do much if we're living paycheck to paycheck, worrying about how we're even gonna be able to pay our bills that month, let alone have enough left over to save and invest. Truthfully, the solution to most of our financial problems is gonna be systemic change, and that's out of the scope of this video, but it is still very much worthwhile to talk about this next strategy, which is honestly the one that has made the biggest difference in easing my financial anxiety, and that is to increase your income. I know, I wouldn't blame you if you're rolling your eyes right now at how obvious this is, but let me share an idea with you that wasn't so obvious to me, and maybe it'll be eye-opening for you too. One of the most life-changing lessons I learned in building my financial literacy is that you have more control over your income than you think. I used to think that I was just stuck with whatever salary I was given, and that was that, because that's what I saw growing up. You get a job, you're given what you earn, and you just make it work. So when I was introduced to the concept of diversifying your income streams and all of the ways that you can increase your earnings, from negotiating a raise to starting a side hustle or even a main hustle, that completely changed everything for me. This might already be obvious to you, but it wasn't to me as someone who doesn't come from an entrepreneurial family and whose friends all took a traditional career path. Now that I know that I don't have to accept having a cap on my income that was decided for me, and I can take matters into my own hands, my entire perspective on money has changed. And instead of feeling limited and restricted when it comes to money, I feel empowered. I don't really think it's relevant for me to talk about how I increase my income in my specific line of work, and this isn't a video on how to get rich. So instead, I'll link some resources in the description that really opened my eyes to the possibilities, and I definitely recommend checking them out. The next strategy is about stepping off the hedonic treadmill. This might be an experience you're familiar with. You get a new job and suddenly you go from making 50K to 75K a year. And at first you're like,
oh my god, this is amazing. I can buy as many matcha lattes as I want.
But then after a few months, you get used to it and it doesn't really feel like anything special anymore. And suddenly 75K doesn't feel like enough. And you're like, actually, I want 100K and then 200K, and it just never ends. This is what it's like to be on the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much you earn and how many nice things you buy, you eventually adapt to that new lifestyle and you're left wanting more, and you're just never satisfied. And for so many of us, that constant feeling feeling like we never have enough and like we always need to be striving for more is the source of so much financial anxiety. But here's the good news. We can choose to step off the hedonic treadmill at any time. The opposite of being on the hedonic treadmill is having a sense of enoughness, which sounds kind of abstract, but there are real practical steps that we can take to get there. And I'll share with you 3 things that I've done that have really helped me, and hopefully they help you too. Number 1, I seriously cut down my social media use. This thing is the source of so much comparison and unhappiness. We see someone we barely even know posting aesthetic photos of their luxury Euro summer, and suddenly our life, which is actually perfectly fine, feels inadequate. I've been there, and that is why I use an app blocker, and I've set it so that I'm only allowed to spend 30 minutes on Instagram every day, and it locks the app between 9 p.m. until 9 a.m. the next morning. And since I started doing this, I found it so much easier to focus on what actually matters to me and what actually brings me joy. And I've also realized that some of the things that I thought I needed to be happy wouldn't even be on my radar if I hadn't seen them on Instagram. Social media should be useful, fun, and inspiring. And the second it stops being any of those things, that should be our cue to take a break, put this thing down, and go do something that actually makes us feel good, like going for a walk or talking to a friend or anything that helps us to reconnect with what we actually care about. The second thing I do is gratitude journaling. In my nightly journaling template, which I do in the Day One app, I have a section to write down 3 things I'm grateful for from today. And the from today part is really important because it encourages me to think about new things to be grateful for every day instead of just repeating the same thing every day. And the third thing I've done is I reflected on a question that I came across in an episode of the 10% Happier app. How much is enough? Is it enough that I can walk into a grocery store and I can technically afford any item I want? Is it enough that I have 2 friends that I know would come through for me if I was in a crisis? Is it enough that I got the leg up in my life that I did because my mom lived that extremely frugal lifestyle? And for me, the answer is yes, that is more than enough for me to be happy right now. Now, because I like to dream big, my version of enough does have some things that I don't have yet, like a big backyard for my dog to play in, which in itself is a financial goal. But the whole point of defining what enough looks like is that I've gotten the goalpost to stop moving. So once I've reached this point, I can stop chasing and just enjoy what I've built. Also, this doesn't mean that I have to wait to be happy. Just because I have goals doesn't mean I can't appreciate what I have now. Those 2 things aren't mutually exclusive, and reminding myself of this has been so essential for me to feel fulfilled right now. So I also invite you to ask yourself, how much is enough? And who knows, you might also find that you actually already have all the things that matter to you the most. You just haven't stopped to feel them in a while. Next is to remind yourself of what really matters. In her book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, Bronnie Ware, who was a nurse working in palliative care, shares the most common regrets of people at the end of their lives. Not one of those regrets had anything to do with wishing they had more money in their bank account. In fact, the second most common regret was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And the other regrets were about not staying in touch with friends, not having the courage to live more authentically, and not letting themselves be happier. It's hard to imagine a more powerful reminder of what actually matters in life than people's final regrets. Now, there's a necessary caveat here. This isn't to say that money doesn't matter at all or to dismiss legitimate financial stress. Obviously, it's going to be hard to remember, oh, I should really reach out to that friend, when the main thing consuming your mind is how you're going to be able to pay your bills that month. That being said, though, it's still worth talking about how many of us have this inherited belief that money is the most important thing in life. And it also doesn't help that our capitalistic society reinforces this idea constantly. So when it's that easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind, we need to make an active effort to remind ourselves of our true priorities and where money actually falls on that list. For me, two of those top priorities are my health and my relationships. I can't make any money if I'm physically or mentally unwell, and even if I had all the money I ever wanted, it wouldn't mean anything if I had no one to share it with. And one of the best ways I've found to cope when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed about money is to engage with these other priorities, because these are the things that truly nourish me. Whether that's spending time with friends and family, or going out in nature, or doing yoga at home, these things never fail to give me a more balanced perspective on life. And they remind me that while money matters, it's not everything. I don't need to feel guilty for buying that matcha latte, and it's okay if I'm not spending all of my time trying to earn more money or optimize every dollar, because sometimes there really are more important things to focus on. Now, this might be the end of our series on building a healthy relationship with money, but this is definitely not the last time we'll talk about this topic on my channel. I am fascinated by this intersection between money and mental health. So if there are any other topics you'd like me to cover, then please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to deliver. Also, please let us know in the comments if you have any other strategies that help you manage financial anxiety, and let's make this video a conversation. And if you missed part 1 of the series, I will leave it linked over here for you to check out. But in any case, as always, I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Bye.